The splash that took everything. I remember the sound before the fall. Not a scream, not a gasp, just the soft clink of a champagne glass behind me. Then nothing. Cold. Salt. Silence. That was the moment my daughter-in-law threw me overboard. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. It was supposed to be a celebration. My 64th birthday. The yacht, the catering, the family smiles, all planned by her. My son's wife. Jenna. Let's toast to Mom, she had said, her voice syrupy, sweet cheeks glowing under the deck lights. I stood there barefoot, the wind tugging at my hair, thinking maybe I was wrong about her after all. Maybe Jenna really had come around. Maybe she meant it this time. I turned to look at the sea, my mistake, and in that second I felt hands on my back. Firm, quick, no hesitation. And then I was in the water. My body hit like dead weight, my breath gone before I could take it. Cold surrounded me. Everything turned black, then blue, then a dim, green-gray nothing. I couldn't scream, couldn't fight. She didn't yell for help. She didn't panic. She just watched. I saw her face looking down at me as the water closed over mine. Her eyes didn't flinch. That was the last thing I saw before I sank under the boat's hull. And in that exact moment, one thought cut through the chaos in my chest. So this is how it ends. But it didn't. That night was the beginning, not the end. They say drowning is peaceful. That's a lie. It's raw, ugly, terrifying. Your body doesn't go quietly. It fights even when your mind lets go. Somehow I surfaced, gasping, choking, alone. Miles from shore, the yacht kept moving, music still playing, no one looking back. The currents dragged me, salt burned my throat, my arms felt like stone, but something else, something deeper kept me alive. It wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was clarity. I floated for hours, caught by a fishing boat just before dawn. The man who pulled me aboard didn't speak much English. He gave me a blanket, a bottle of water, and just stared at me like I was a ghost. And maybe I was, because the woman who came out of that sea wasn't the same one who went in. They said I should call the police. I didn't. Not yet. They offered to take me to a hospital. I refused. I gave a fake name. Told them I fell from a tourist boat. They didn't ask more. They didn't need to. I asked to be dropped off at a port 3 towns south. No ID, no phone. Nothing but seawater in my lungs, and a small key tied around my neck. The key Jenna hadn't found. The one to my safety box. She thought she'd erased me. That I'd vanish. That the money, the foundation, the land, the inheritance would slide right into her hands. She thought she'd won. And honestly, for a while, so did I. But when I sat alone in that motel room wrapped in a towel, shaking not from cold, but from the reality of it all, something shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the wall, at nothing, at everything I'd let happen for the past 10 years, all the signs, the little cuts, the slow silencing, the way Jenna had chipped away at my voice until there was nothing left. I trusted her. I gave her everything. I treated her like a daughter, and she threw me away like an old scarf she didn't need anymore, because $4 billion sat quietly in our family trust. Money I'd earned through decades of real estate small ventures scrimping and starting over after my husband died. Money I swore to protect for my son, for my grandkids. But Jenna wanted it now. And with me out of the picture, she'd get it. Unless I did something she never expected. Unless I stayed dead just long enough. That was the plan forming in my mind that first night. Stay quiet. Stay hidden, and watch it all unfold. I still had access to the trust's backup files. I had the revised will from 2 years ago sealed, notarized, and secured off-site. I had receipts, signatures, paper trails, and I had people who owed me favors. All I needed was time. Time to see who mourned me. Time to see how fast they moved to take what wasn't theirs. Time to find out if my son, my only child, was part of it. Because here's the thing, Jenna may have pushed me, but my son let her in the room, and that hurt more than the water. The media ran with the story the next day. Philanthropist's mother lost at sea. Tragic accident on family yacht. A beloved matriarch remembered. Not a single detail about the push. No investigation. Not even a whisper of suspicion. Because Jenna was careful, smart, charming. She'd cried on camera, held my granddaughter on her lap during the vigil, thanked everyone for their support during this tragic time, and my son stood next to her, silent. The man I'd raised, the boy I protected. He didn't say my name once. That was when I knew. They had both made their choice. Now it was time to make mine. Before Jenna, before the yacht, before the silence and betrayal, there was just me and Matthew. He was my entire world. Still is in some ways, though I'll never admit that out loud again. I was 22 when I had him, young, naive, determined. His father, my first real love, died in a car accident when Matthew was 6 months old, and just like that, it was me against the world, a tiny apartment, hand-me-down furniture, diapers I had to ration some weeks, but I never let Matthew see the fear. I worked 2 jobs waitressing by day, cleaning offices by night. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't care. Every time he reached out those chubby arms and called me Mama, I knew it was worth it. We had our little rituals. Saturday pancakes. Bedtime stories even when I could barely keep my eyes open. I taught him to tie his shoes, how to look people in the eye, how to speak up, but also how to listen. He grew up kind, thoughtful, always watching out for me. I remember one winter when he was 12, I came home with soaked boots and a cough. He had taken the $10 from his piggy bank and walked 3 blocks to buy me cough syrup and tea bags. He left them on the kitchen counter with a note, "So you don't have to feel alone." That note. I still have it, folded and tucked into my wallet. When he got into college on scholarship, I sobbed for 3 days, not because I was sad, but because I knew every overtime shift, every skipped meal, every time I said no to myself had brought him to that moment. I thought we'd made it. I really did. I started to build my real estate portfolio while he was in college. Small properties, at first old duplexes in rough neighborhoods that no one wanted. I fixed them up, rented them out. Slowly, methodically, I grew. By the time Matthew graduated, I had turned $10,000 into almost $2 million in property value. When he came back home with a degree in business, I brought him into the company. He had fresh ideas. He helped me modernize everything, our digital records, our branding, even our logo. "This is your legacy, Mom," he told me. "Let's make it unstoppable." And we did. Within 5 years, we were holding commercial properties in 3 provinces. We created a foundation in my name, housing support for low-income single mothers. I was proud, not just of what we built, but of us. Then Jenna came into the picture. I remember the first time I met her. Matthew brought her to dinner at my house. She was wearing a blue blouse and white heels, tall, elegant. She looked like she belonged in a magazine, not our modest family kitchen. She smiled. She laughed at all the right times. She complimented the roast I'd made, even asked for the recipe. But there was something... I couldn't explain it then. It wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't. She never looked at Matthew like I did. Not like someone who'd stood beside him when he had nothing. She looked at him like a solution, like an elevator button that could take her to the penthouse floor. But I kept that to myself, because Matthew was happy. At least he seemed that way. She moved in within a few months, got pregnant a few months after that, and I'll admit when I held my granddaughter for the first time, something in me softened. She was beautiful. Tiny pink cheeks, a tuft of dark hair, and the smallest fingers I'd ever seen. I thought maybe I was wrong about Jenna. Maybe I was just being protective. So I leaned in. I helped with diapers, with night feedings. I stocked their fridge, paid for the baby's crib, the stroller, even Jenna's postnatal care. No questions asked. And when they got married, quiet ceremony at a vineyard, just 30 guests, I smiled through all of it. Even though I wasn't part of the planning, even though Jenna's family didn't speak to me, even though Matthew seemed more distracted than joyful that day. After the wedding, Jenna started offering to help more with the company. She suggested I take more time off. Relax, travel. "You've worked so hard all your life," she said one afternoon, handing me a cup of chamomile tea. "Let us take care of things for a while." I wanted to believe her, so I stepped back, took a month off, visited my sister out east, came back to find they'd streamlined several departments, laid off people I trusted for over a decade, and rebranded the foundation, removing my name entirely. When I asked Matthew why, he said, "It's not personal, Mom. Jenna's just trying to modernize things. Not personal." Funny how betrayal always dresses itself in that phrase. I tried to speak up, to push back, but every time I did, it turned into a tension that made my granddaughter cry. So I swallowed it, kept the peace. They moved into my home, citing logistics while they renovated their new place. Then little by little, things I loved disappeared. Family heirlooms, my husband's watch, the wooden jewelry box from my grandmother. All misplaced or in storage. I wasn't stupid, but I was tired. And when you've spent your life fighting sometimes, you just stop. I stopped asking questions, stopped inserting myself. But I never stopped watching, because under all that silence, I felt something growing in me. Not bitterness, not quite. It was more like recognition that this family I'd built with love brick by brick had cracks in its foundation. And those cracks started forming the moment I let someone else convince me that rest meant stepping away from the table entirely. They were rearranging my legacy without me. And still, I held hope. Hope that my son would wake up, that he'd see the subtle shifts, the legal changes, the meetings I was no longer invited to. But the more I waited, the more I realized I was the only one hoping. Jenna didn't just want space. She wanted ownership. And there was only one thing standing in her way: me. It started with the passwords. I came home one day and couldn't access the company server. Tried my usual login, denied. I tried the backup key file on my external hard drive, corrupted. Strange, I thought. Tech hiccups happen. But then I asked Matthew. He paused. Just for a second. Oh, right. Jenna had IT update the system, something about improving cybersecurity. He shrugged like it was nothing. I'll get you the new credentials. But he didn't. Days passed. Weeks. I asked again. And again. Each time it was, oh shoot, I forgot. Or ask Jenna, she has it, or, we've been swamped, Mom. Swamped. In a business I built from scratch. Still, I told myself, give it time. Jenna's helping. Maybe she really is just trying to improve things. Then the office manager I hired 15 years ago, Sandra, called me crying. I'm being pushed out, Mrs. Gibbons, she whispered like the walls could hear her. She's cutting my hours. Said I'm not aligned with the vision. What vision? You were the vision. I had no answer, only a sick twist in my stomach. I told Sandra I'd look into it. I meant it. But that night when I brought it up to Matthew, his face hardened. You can't keep interfering, he said. We're trying to move forward. You keep dragging us back. I built this, Matthew, I said softly. Everything you have. He raised his hand, not violently but sharp, like he was done listening. Let it go, Mom. Let it go. That's what they wanted. Me. Gone. And I'll tell you the truth, there was a part of me that almost did. Because it hurts to fight the people you love. Hurts more than any business loss or financial hit. The pain isn't sharp. It's dull daily, like living in a house with a gas leak you can't smell. The kind that kills you slowly. I tried to smile through it. I really did. I still made dinner, still helped with my granddaughter, still played the role of the gentle matriarch while Jenna took more and more space. But the shift was clear. She no longer asked if she could make changes. She just made them. New accounting firm, outsourced staff, changed how the foundation reported its numbers. And when I asked about it, she'd tilt her head and say, It's all transparent, Helen. You're welcome to look. Everything's filed properly. Except by then, I couldn't access anything. I started keeping a notebook, old-fashioned spiral-bound, dates, comments, patterns. Because one day, Jenna came into my bedroom, and handed me a health insurance renewal form. It's just a formality, she said, smiling too much. Some of the new policies require reauthorization. Mind signing here, I took the paper. Didn't say anything, just nodded. Later that night, I read every line. It wasn't a renewal, it was a waiver. It removed me as the primary holder and made the trust responsible for medical decisions. If I had signed it and something had happened to me, she would have had full control. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up in bed staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with a truth I could no longer ignore. She wanted me gone. And I started asking myself questions I'd been too afraid to ask before. Why had Matthew stopped asking for my opinion? Why was I being phased out, document by document? Why had the Foundation's legal advisor, an old friend, suddenly stopped returning my calls? The answer settled in slowly. Because Jenna was smarter than I'd thought. She wasn't just working around me. She was building a case that I was irrelevant. Old. In the way. Maybe even unstable. It wasn't just about the money. It was about legacy, control, image. She was painting a future where I simply didn't exist. And the worst part, Matthew was helping her do it, not overtly, not cruelly, but by being silent, by letting her take over temporarily, by calling me tired in front of the board. Tired, he said. I remember that exact moment. We were at a quarterly meeting. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but I'd shown up anyway. When I asked why my signature was missing on the new development deal, Jenna gave me that tight little smile of hers, and Matthew leaned in and said to the board, "She's been stepping back lately. We've all noticed. Maybe it's time we let her rest." Let me rest. I sat there surrounded by people I had mentored, hired, believed in, and none of them said a word. I felt like a ghost in a room I built. Afterward, I went home and looked at myself in the mirror. 64. Silver hair pulled back. Lines around my mouth that hadn't been there 10 years ago. Was I tired? Maybe, but not tired enough to die. And that's when something inside me hardened. I didn't yell, didn't argue. I just nodded. "Maybe you're right," I told Matthew the next morning. "I've been pushing too hard." He looked relieved. Jenna smiled. "You deserve peace, Helen. Peace." They didn't know what I was doing behind the scenes. Didn't know I'd started transferring digital records to a second cloud drive. Didn't know the old lawyer I'd worked with in the beginning still owed me a favor and had quietly drawn up new protections under an alias months ago. Didn't know about the safety deposit box in Montreal or the burner phone I kept hidden in my sewing drawer. They thought I was breaking down, but I wasn't. I was watching, documenting, preparing, because the woman they thought they'd outsmarted wasn't weak. She was waiting, and the more they plotted, the more I learned, until the day came when Jenna booked that yacht trip. Just family, she said. A celebration for everything we've built. I smiled, said yes, and packed my blue windbreaker with the inside pocket zipped shut. Because I had already written the letter, already made the copy, and I knew deep in my bones that she was about to make her final move. She thought she'd end me. She didn't know I'd already begun. The silence started as a survival tactic. After that board meeting, after being called tired in front of the people who used to defer to me, I realized there was no winning the old way. Not with arguments, not with reason, not even with love. So I shut my mouth. Not because I gave up, but because I needed space. To listen, to watch. The more silent I became, the more careless Jenna got. It started with a phone call she made in the sunroom. She assumed I was out on my walk, but I doubled back to grab my reading glasses. I stopped outside the door when I heard her voice, low, clipped, annoyed. "No, the paperwork is not complete until I get her to sign it. That's why the trip matters. She's vulnerable, distracted, she's ready. I just need her alone." There was a pause. "No, Matt won't question it. He's already told me she's not well." Not well. I stepped away from the door like it had burned me, walked straight to my room, sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the closet where my husband's old blazers still hung. They were painting me as unstable. And Matthew, was in on it. That hurt more than anything else. It was one thing for Jenna to manipulate, to connive. But for my son, my baby boy, to be the one holding the brush that broke something in me. But instead of crying, I got up and opened my jewelry box. Hidden under the velvet lining was the USB drive I'd kept since the year Matthew and I started the business. It held every transaction from day one. Copies of land titles, contracts, silent partner agreements, Versions of the company bylaws they thought had been erased. I plugged it in, transferred every file to my backup cloud. Then I hid it again, this time in the medicine cabinet behind the old bandages Jenna never touched. The silence gave me access. Jenna stopped pretending. She'd walk past me like I was a maid, gave instructions about foundation events without even acknowledging me. Some mornings she'd smile at my granddaughter and say, "Go kiss Grandma goodbye before school," like I was furniture, something the child would outgrow. She was so confident. And that's the thing about people like Jenna, they only notice you when you're talking. Once you stop, they think you've disappeared. I was invisible. And invisibility has power. I started following paper trails, asking soft questions in the right rooms, rebuilding connections with people who'd been quietly pushed out. Sandra, our first accountant, even a past lawyer from a decade ago. Most of them were hesitant at first, thought I was calling to stir up drama, but then I told them what I'd heard, what I suspected, what was coming. I didn't ask for action, I asked for confirmation, and I got it. Jenna had been working behind the scenes for over a year, shifting assets under Matthew's name, filing legal revisions to the trust, trying to force a clause that would name her as executive trustee if I was found unfit or deceased. They were building a case for both. She needed either my death or my decline. And the yacht trip. It was the closing act. I think part of her believed I'd sign one last document, maybe under a little champagne and sunshine, maybe while feeling flattered that they wanted to honor me at sea. I saw it all play out in my mind. Her leading me up to the bow, that fake soft voice. "Just sign here, Helen. It's all in your name anyway." And if I refused, she had a backup plan. I'd disappear. The ocean would take me. They'd cry on TV. A memorial, a few edited headlines, a few vague words from Matthew about her recent confusion. And the fortune would shift overnight. I didn't have proof of her intent to kill me, not yet, but I didn't need proof to prepare. I needed insurance. So I made copies, notarized statements, had 2 private investigators start tracking legal filings under the trust's name. I even recorded a video, just one, a simple monologue in my study. "If you're seeing this, something has happened to me," I said, and it wasn't an accident. I named names, explained the transfers, laid out dates, even included personal memories ones only Matthew could verify to ensure it was me. I didn't plan to use it, but if I disappeared, I wanted the world to hear my voice again. The week before the trip, Jenna seemed chipper. She was glowing with control, walking taller. Her confidence wasn't just in her posture, it was in her language. "This cruise will be so good for you," she said, setting down the itinerary on my kitchen table. "Just you, me, Matthew, and the sea. No staff, no other family, just us, trapped on water." I smiled. "Sounds peaceful." The day we boarded, I wore my windbreaker. Inside the lining, I'd sewn in a copy of the Power of Attorney form Jenna had tried to sneak past me a month earlier unsigned. I brought nothing valuable, no phone, no jewelry, just a metal key on a chain around my neck tucked under my shirt, the key to my safety deposit box. The yacht was beautiful, private, cold in its way. Matthew barely made eye contact with me that first day. I watched him, studied how he flinched every time Jenna made a suggestion, how he poured another drink faster than he answered a question. He was crumbling, and she was using that. That night under the stars, she stood beside me. We were alone. She poured champagne into 2 glasses, held one out to me. "You were always stronger than people thought," she said, "but even strong women get tired. I didn't drink. I just looked at her and smiled. I'm not tired, just patient. She blinked. That's the last thing I remember before I felt her hands. The water didn't scare me. The betrayal did. The weight of knowing that I had loved people who calculated my death like a tax decision, but the silence had taught me one thing. What they thought was surrender was just stillness. What they saw as weakness was just witness. I didn't scream when I went under because I already had everything I needed, and now I had nothing left to lose. The ocean didn't welcome me. It devoured me. Salt in my eyes, pressure crushing my chest. The cold didn't feel like water. It felt like a grip, tight, punishing. But I didn't panic. I knew the moment Jenna shoved me, this was it. She'd finally crossed the line we'd both been dancing around for months, and it should have been the end. It should have worked. Except I was ready. I didn't scream, didn't flail. I let the fall happen just like I'd let her believe I'd surrendered over the past year. I sank, and then I swam. Painfully, slowly. One arm then the other, kicking, gasping, swallowing more sea than air, but I made it to the surface. The yacht lights disappeared behind me like dying stars. She didn't turn back. Not once. I floated, prayed, cursed, watched the sky for hours wondering if my body would be claimed by salt or sharks. And then, like a miracle, the fishing vessel appeared. An old man, sun-creased and silent, pulled me from the water. He wrapped me in a tarp and gave me water, no questions asked. I couldn't speak for the first hour. My throat was raw. My heart ruined. When I finally whispered, "Don't tell anyone," he just nodded. We docked at a small port an hour south of where the yacht had left. I thanked him, gave a false name. Paid him with the emergency cash I kept inside my boot lining. He never looked back. And then I vanished. No calls, no news, no social media. I spent that night in a roadside motel with flickering lights and a broken lock on the door. I stood under the hot shower until my skin burned. Scrubbed salt from every inch of me. Looked at myself in the cracked mirror and saw a stranger. Red eyes, pale lips, wrinkled skin pulled tight from cold and betrayal. She looked like a ghost. But ghosts have power, and now I had nothing to protect, nothing to soften, nothing left to lose. The very next morning, I took a bus across the border, wore a scarf, left my wedding ring in a donation box at a church thrift store, bought a prepaid phone and called one person, Len Carver, retired detective. Once a close friend of my late husband, he owed me 3 favors and knew better than to ask why I was cashing them in now. I need quiet eyes, I told him. I need to know everything she's done, everything she's doing. I need to know how far the rock goes. Len didn't hesitate. I'm on it. While Len began tracing Jenna's movements, I went to Montreal, opened my deposit box, retrieved the will I'd updated 2 years ago, the one Jenna didn't know existed, the one that split the trust between charity scholarship foundations and a legacy clause that ensured Matthew could not act as trustee without my living approval. Not if I was missing, not if I was unfit, only if I was dead and confirmed as such. Jenna had gambled that I hadn't protected myself, that I hadn't thought to secure a backup. She was wrong. I also retrieved a small leather folder copies of real estate transactions she'd manipulated, emails she'd altered, and most importantly, her voice. I had dozens of recordings, subtle ones, Conversations captured through the nanny cam I had hidden behind the bookshelf in my study before she moved me out of my own office. Once she's gone, we'll file everything. The board won't question it. They love a clean story. You think she knows Matthew had asked once, his voice shaking? She's too old to fight it, Jenna had replied. She won't even know what hit her. She was right about one thing: I didn't know what hit me. But now, they wouldn't know what was coming either. I stayed off the radar for 3 weeks, lived under a different name, cashed out small sums, let the world believe I was gone. And in that quiet, something changed in me. The grief melted into something colder, harder. Not hate, not vengeance, just resolve. She tried to erase me, thought I'd die and take my secrets with me, but I had never been more alive. Len called me from a blocked number. They're moving fast, he said. She's already spoken to a lawyer about liquidating the foundation's assets. Has Matthew signed off? Looks like it. Either he's in on it, or she's forged a few things. I felt my stomach drop, but only for a second. What else house titles changed? She's listed as co-owner now. That happened 3 days after you went overboard. I didn't reply. She's holding press conferences, Len added, talking about your legacy, smiling a lot, playing the grieving daughter-in-law like a damn Oscar performance. Of course she was. She wanted the world to feel sorry for her. Poor Jenna. Tragic accident. Beloved mother-in-law gone too soon. A strong woman left behind to hold the family together. She underestimated me. That's what saved me. Because she believed I'd go quietly. She didn't think I'd wait. But I did. I waited until she was comfortable. Until the media had picked up her interviews. Until Matthew started making business appearances again. Until the board scheduled a memorial gala in my honor, a showy fundraiser with banners of my face and speeches about resilience. And then I made my move. I called my lawyer. Ready to go public, he asked, voice tight with nerves. Not yet, I said. Then what first? I want to walk into that gala. He exhaled hard. They'll lose their minds. I smiled. That's the point. Because you don't beat someone like Jenna with shouting or violence. You beat her with the one thing she can't control: truth. The truth I'd sewn into documents. The truth I'd etched into videos. The truth I'd buried for years, even as I watched my family fall under her spell. I wasn't drowning. I was buying time. And now, time was up. The invitation came the week after they declared me legally dead. A memorial gala. Black tie, hosted by the Gibbons Family Foundation, now legally under Jenna's name. My name was everywhere on the flyer, celebrating the life and legacy of Helen Gibbons. Elegant script. White roses in the background. Suggested donation $10,000 per seat. They were selling my death. I sat in a borrowed apartment downtown, staring at the glossy email on my burner phone. I kept zooming in on Matthew's face in the promo photo. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Len had already confirmed what I suspected. She didn't just push me off that yacht. She'd also fast-tracked the paperwork while I was missing. She forged a death certificate citing an off-the-record Coast Guard report, one she likely paid for. The body was unrecoverable. No autopsy, no investigation. Within 9 days, she had me buried in words and signatures. And that's when her smile began to crack. Len told me about the junior associate at the law firm who flagged inconsistencies in the trust changes. She pushed too fast, he said. The young one found a mismatch between the trust's original structuring and the revised version Jenna filed. Did they report it? I asked. They sent a quiet memo to the senior partner. He sent it to the bank holding the assets. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. A single hairline fracture. Just one. That's all you need to break glass. I called the bank myself under the authority of the alias tied to the original trust. The voice recognition still worked. They asked a few questions, hesitated, then unlocked the sealed file I'd created 2 years ago marked open only upon client's confirmed death or directive. Inside, a freeze order. Any unauthorized liquidation of assets upon ambiguous death, immediate hold. Review committee. Independent audit. Jenna didn't know that clause existed. And when the bank made the call to her attorney, the smile cracked deeper. According to Len, she panicked, fired off emails, tried to schedule meetings with the review board, claimed it was a misunderstanding, that I'd wanted her to take over. But she had no recorded consent, no video, no voice, no signature, just her word. And suddenly, her word wasn't enough. She tried to delay the gala, claimed the press attention was distracting, but it was too late. Money had been spent. Sponsors locked in. The board, already uneasy, insisted they move forward. And Matthew, he didn't object. He never objected. That's what I couldn't stop turning over in my mind. He hadn't thrown me into the sea, but he stood beside the woman who did. Let her speak for me. Let her mourn me in front of cameras. Let her wear white to my memorial because black was too heavy. He let her bury me while I was still breathing. So I waited. The night of the gala arrived. I didn't go in through the front doors. Too loud, too obvious. Instead, I slipped in through the staff entrance in the back hair, pinned up a long coat covering my dress. I wore the pearl necklace Matthew had given me on my 50th birthday, just to remind him. The ballroom was gold and white. Banners with my face hung from the ceiling. Candles flickered across tables. Waiters floated like shadows. And then I saw her, Jenna, standing on the stage, dressed in cream satin, holding the mic like she owned the night. I remember Helen as the backbone of our family, she said, voice thick with false emotion. She was strong, complex, determined. And though we lost her too soon, we honor her legacy tonight by continuing the work she believed in. My shoes tapped softly as I walked through the back of the room. People turned, one by one. A waiter dropped a tray. Matthew looked up from the head table and froze. His mouth opened, closed. And Jenna. Her voice caught mid-sentence. She stared straight at me, color draining from her face like someone had flipped a switch. Silence. Then whispers. Gasps. The entire room turned cold. I didn't stop walking until I reached the foot of the stage. I didn't speak right away. I just looked up at her and waited. The mic trembled in her hand. "You're..." she began, voice cracking. "Alive," I said. "Yes. Much to your disappointment, I'm sure." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I turned to the room. "You've all been so generous tonight." "Thank you." "I'm touched. But I didn't come here for applause." I pulled a folder from my coat. "I came here to set the record straight." Security moved toward me. I held up a hand. "Don't. This is my event after all." I handed the folder to the board chair, Daniel Myers, a man who'd once sat in my kitchen asking for funding for his after-school program, inside proof, audio recordings, signature inconsistencies, a notarized timeline of my whereabouts, and the updated will with its emergency clause. "I didn't fall off a yacht," I said. "I was pushed." But I survived. Jenna dropped the mic. Literally. It clattered across the stage. She tried to speak, but words failed her. Matthew still hadn't moved. I turned to him. "You knew." His eyes welled with something. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. I didn't know she'd... I shook my head. "You didn't ask." I faced the crowd again. "You all donated tonight in my memory. But I'm not a memory. I'm here." And from this moment on, everything changes. Flashbulbs went off, phones came up, people whisper shouted. Jenna stumbled off the stage. Tried to escape through the side, but Len was already there waiting. He handed her a folded sheet of paper. A summons, civil court, and the beginning of a federal investigation. Jenna didn't look back as they led her out. Her perfect hair, her flawless makeup. None of it mattered anymore. Because truth, when delivered calmly publicly, can't be denied. And as the doors closed behind her, I felt something I hadn't in years. Stillness. Not peace. Not yet. But the first breath of it. And I let it settle in my chest like the weight I'd been carrying had finally cracked. Just like her smile. The press swarmed the building like flies on sugar, flashing cameras, shouted questions, boom mics peeking over the crowd. Outside the courthouse, a podium had been set up in front of the Gibbons Foundation banner, flanked by 2 security guards in tailored suits. Jenna stood at the center of it all. She wore black this time. No pearls, no white satin. Just a sleek, form-fitting dress that screamed sorrow and sophistication. Her makeup was flawless as always, but she couldn't hide the tension in her jaw. Not anymore. I waited across the street in the back of a cab, the window cracked just enough to let the sound in. She cleared her throat, leaned forward, and began. "I want to start by addressing the recent confusion," she said, voice thick with carefully crafted emotion. "As many of you know, the past few weeks have been incredibly painful for our family. The reappearance of Helen Gibbons, my mother-in-law, has brought up a lot of questions, and I'm here today to clarify our position." Our position. Even now she spoke like she was queen of a collapsing kingdom. Beside her, Matthew stared into the distance. Pale. Silent. His tie crooked like he'd dressed in a hurry. Like he wasn't even sure what side he was on anymore. I watched them both. Let them twist a little longer. Jenna continued. "While we're grateful Helen is alive and safe, we were operating under the information provided by maritime authorities. The disappearance was reported immediately, and we did everything we could to navigate that tragedy in good faith." Good faith. She said it with such conviction you'd almost believe it if you didn't know what I knew. The forged documents, the death certificate submitted without a body, the quiet rush to claim executive rights over the family trust. The emails, the phone calls, the way she toasted to my memory 2 days before filing paperwork to reallocate funds. She wasn't just dishonest. She was methodical. And for a while, she'd been winning. I opened the cab door slowly, paid the driver, tucked my scarf tighter around my neck, and stepped into the chaos. I didn't walk fast. I didn't run. I moved through the crowd like I had every right to be there. Because I did. The first camera to catch me swung violently, almost knocking over a reporter. I saw it happen like a domino line. One person turned, then another. A low ripple moved through the crowd like a tremor before a quake. And then gasps. Dozens of them! Jenna stopped speaking mid-sentence. Her eyes locked on mine. I saw her freeze. The air between us felt like glass. And then snap. I stepped up to the podium beside her. Not behind her. Beside her. Matthew blinked eyes wide. "Helen." Jenna started. I put one hand on the mic. Calm. Steady. "Good morning," I said, my voice echoing out across the courtyard. "I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to be present since the topic of this conference seems to be me." Soft laughter from the crowd. A few murmurs. Jenna's expression faltered. "Just for a second. 3 weeks ago, I said my daughter-in-law attempted to murder me." The words hung in the air like a dropped chandelier. She pushed me off a yacht. I was not intoxicated. I was not disoriented. I was standing upright facing the water, and she put her hands on my back and shoved. I turned slightly toward her. I remember every second. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. I didn't flinch. She didn't report me missing until 12 hours later, claimed she thought I had gone below deck. She lied to the Coast Guard. She filed a false death certificate. She signed legal paperwork declaring me deceased, and she attempted to take full control of the trust my husband and I built from nothing. Jenna stepped back. Just slightly, like the air around me had become too much. I took a breath, let silence hang before I continued. But more than that, she exploited the man I love most in this world. My son. I turned my eyes on Matthew, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in his face I recognized. Shame. Pain. And under it all, the smallest flicker of a boy I once raised. "I can't speak for his choices," I said. "I won't pretend to understand how this happened, but I know what truth looks like. And I know what silence can cost." I pulled a small flash drive from my coat pocket and placed it on the podium. "This is the original trust, the clause Jenna tried to erase. It proves her motive, her fraud, and her intent." I turned to the crowd one final time. "And let me be clear, this is not about revenge. I'm not here to reclaim wealth. I'm here because I'm alive, and because I refuse to be erased." I stepped away from the mic and walked past Jenna. As I passed, I looked at her not with fury, not with triumph, just clarity. "You should have made it look like an accident," I whispered. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Security parted as I walked out. Nobody stopped me. Nobody questioned my right to be there. And as I stepped into the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt since before Matthew stopped looking me in the eye. I felt whole, not healed, not yet, but whole. Later that night, I watched the footage back online. Some clips had gone viral. The top comment under one of them read, "She walked in like a ghost with a pulse and burned the whole lie down." I smiled, because that's exactly what I'd done. I didn't scream. I didn't throw punches. I just showed up. And sometimes, that's all it takes to shatter someone's empire. 3 days after the press conference, I received an anonymous envelope. No return address. Just my name in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a USB. No note. No explanation. I stared at it for almost an hour before plugging it in. It contained 6 audio files, labeled by dates, recorded in my own house. Len confirmed later that they'd been pulled from a security system Jenna had disabled or thought she had. Apparently, she'd missed one backup stream, one redundant device hidden behind the fireplace mantel. I clicked the first file. The audio crackled, then cleared. Matthew's voice. "She's not herself anymore," he said. "Tired, nervous. I mean, she talks to herself." "Wears the same thing for days." Jenna laughed. "She's old babe. That's what happens." "Yeah, but she's still sharp sometimes. Like, too sharp." Another pause. "We need to get her out before she complicates things," Jenna said. "Before she gets paranoid. She'll ruin everything." Click. I went still. My hands gripped the sides of the desk like they might fly away otherwise. Click. Second file. "She's a burden," Jenna said. "She just drifts around the house like a shadow. You don't see it, but I do. She watches everything. She's waiting to strike." "I know," Matthew murmured. "But she's my mom," Jenna snapped. "Then act like a man and handle it." Click. File 3. "She's had her time," Jenna said. "She built her empire." "Great. Clap, clap. But now it's ours. She just doesn't know how to let go." "You don't think she'll—" "She won't. You've seen her lately. She's halfway to dementia. She signs anything I give her. She still thinks I like her." A long pause, then Matthew whispered, "Do what you have to." Click. The words hit harder than the push ever did, because betrayal by a stranger is survivable. But when your child calls you a burden behind closed doors, when he gives permission for your life to be erased, there's no coming back from that. Not really. Click. File 4. Jenna. "After the trip, it's all clean. Just clean. We say she slipped. We mourn. We inherit. Matthew. We Jenna. Don't get soft now. Not when we're this close." Click. 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 Each file was a blade, not just because of what they said, but because of how casually they said it. I wasn't their enemy. I was an inconvenience, a speed bump between them and a fortune they never earned. And Matthew, he didn't just let it happen. He helped. After listening to the final file, I closed the laptop, took a long breath, felt like something in me cracked, not shattered, but split wide enough to let the cold in, and once it's in, it never quite leaves. The next morning, I forwarded the recordings to my legal team. They said it was enough. Enough for a criminal investigation. Enough for civil charges. Enough to sink her. But it still didn't feel like victory, because there's no version of this where I win back what matters most. I can expose Jenna. I can protect the trust. I can rebuild the foundation with integrity and purpose. But I cannot make my son see me again. Not as his mother. Not as the woman who raised him. Not as anything more than a problem he wanted solved. And that's the part no one talks about. The part after the storm. After the cameras shut off. After the applause fades. After the truth comes out. What remains is silence. Not the silence of surrender, the silence of grief. Matthew called once. Just once. Blocked number. No voicemail. I didn't answer. I couldn't. What would I even say? Why did you ever love me? Would you have pushed me yourself if she asked you to? No answer would make it right. So I let the call go to nowhere. In the weeks that followed, Jenna was formally charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Her lawyers did what they could, claimed mental strain, claimed maritime confusion, claimed I was a manipulator and she acted in fear. But the recordings broke that case in half. She never cried on the stand, not once, just stared forward, jaw-clenched hands folded. Matthew didn't appear in court. Not for her. Not for me. He disappeared from public view entirely. One tabloid ran a piece titled "The Son Who Stayed Silent." Another speculated about his mental health. I didn't care. I wasn't watching anymore, because I already knew the truth. He didn't just stay silent. He agreed. He signed papers. He sat in meetings. He opened the door that Jenna walked through with a knife behind her back. He let her in. And that was the true betrayal. Money is always a motive. Greed is always expected. But silence from someone who once kissed your forehead goodnight, that's the real poison. I spent the next few months reassembling my life. I reinstated the board. I reopened the foundation under a new name, one that meant something. The Second Shore. Because some of us survive drowning, and when we do, we don't go back to where we came from. We build again on land we choose. I wrote a letter to my granddaughter. She's too young to understand now, but one day she'll ask what happened, why Grandma vanished, why Mommy went to jail, why Daddy never answered questions. And when she does, that letter will be waiting, not with bitterness, not with blame, just the truth, because she deserves it. And I won't let Jenna or anyone steal my voice again, not even in whispers. I waited for him to say something, anything, a call, a letter, a text, even just a single word, Mom. But silence was all I got. And I'll be honest with you, the silence hurt more than the fall, more than the salt in my lungs, more than every betrayal Jenna planned. Because she wasn't my blood. He was. Matthew was my son, my only child. And he said nothing. I watched his name disappear from headlines like someone had wiped him clean off a chalkboard. No public statements, no denial, no apology, not even an excuse. The world assumed he was ashamed or afraid. But I knew better. I knew what silence meant with Matthew. It meant agreement. Because when he was young, when something upset him, he'd close up, say nothing for days, and I'd wait. Make his favorite stew, sit next to him with a hand on his back. And when he was ready, he'd finally speak. But he wasn't a child anymore, and now silence wasn't about pain, it was about protection, his own. Because he knew. He knew. That voicemail I received a week after Jenna's indictment, just a short 5-second breath before the line went dead. I replayed it a dozen times, hoping I'd hear something underneath it. Hoping for guilt, for shame, for a pause that might have sounded like love. There was nothing. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before. He didn't want to fix it. He wanted to forget it. To erase me, not just from the trust, not just from the house, but from the story. Because remembering me, the real me, meant acknowledging what he did. And that was the one thing he could never face. I didn't want revenge from him. I wanted recognition. Just once, I wanted to hear him say it. I'm sorry, Mom. I knew. I didn't stop her. But it never came. I received a certified letter instead. From his lawyer. He was relinquishing all claims to the Gibbons family trust and removing himself from all financial and administrative responsibilities. His name would be removed from all board affiliations, from the foundation charter, and from the trust's oversight language. It was clean, legally sound, morally hollow. At the bottom of the page there was a handwritten note, 4 words scribbled in a hurried slant. I never meant to. That was all. No greeting, no signature, not even my name. I sat in the garden with that letter in my hands, the sun soft on my face, and I realized I had buried my son. Not by death, but by truth. And truth, when uncovered, doesn't just take down the villains. Sometimes it sweeps away the people we once loved too. I thought back to that little boy in Spider-Man pajamas who clung to my leg when he was scared, to the teenager who held my hand at his graduation because he knew I'd cry, to the man who called me at midnight the day his daughter was born, just to say, "You were right about everything." And I asked myself the hardest question I've ever asked: was that love ever real? Or was I just useful until I wasn't? I wish I could tell you I found peace after that I forgave him quietly in my heart, that I moved on. But the truth, I grieved. I grieved like someone had died, because in a way, someone had. Not just the version of him I remembered, but the version of me who still believed he'd come back. The week Jenna was sentenced 12 years with a minimum of 9 before parole, I didn't attend court. I didn't need to. The law had spoken. The headlines had already shifted, and I wasn't interested in looking at her one more time through a glass wall. I didn't want to see her cry. I didn't want to hear her lie. She was no longer part of my story. Not really. What haunted me was Matthew. What kept me awake wasn't the fall. It was the after. The weeks I spent hiding, half hoping he'd defy her, come looking, say something, anything that proved he hadn't been fully lost. But he didn't. I watched the footage from the gala 100 times. The moment I stepped on the stage, the second he saw me, the flicker in his eyes. And even now, I can't tell what it was. Shock, fear, or disappointment that the plan didn't work. People asked me later, "Will you forgive him?" And I'd just smile quiet, because forgiveness isn't a performance. It's a process. And mine hasn't ended. I set a condition with my lawyer. If Matthew ever reaches out, not through attorneys, not through money, but with his voice, I'll listen. But until then, he's out. No inheritance, no trustee rights, no soft re-entry. I drew the boundary in permanent ink, and that's what people don't always understand about betrayal. It doesn't always end in fire. Sometimes it ends in silence, and sometimes silence is the justice. I didn't want to go at first. The trial, the cameras, the reporters, they all felt like shadows I'd already outrun. I didn't need more closure. I'd found mine the moment I stood at that podium and looked Jenna in the eye. But my lawyer insisted. You don't have to speak. Just be there. So I went. I wore the same pearl necklace, the same calm expression, the same silence I'd sharpened into armor. When I stepped into that courtroom, I thought I'd feel rage. Instead, all I felt was distance. Jenna sat at the defendant's table, hair pulled back, dark blazer over a cream blouse. Not a trace of the woman who used to host brunches and compliment my stew with that overly sweet voice. She looked older, smaller. She glanced at me only once, and I didn't blink. She'd hired the best team money could buy. Her lead attorney was slick, smooth, practiced. He called the events a misunderstanding, a tragic miscommunication during a vulnerable moment at sea. He even tried to suggest I had fallen willingly. She had been exhibiting signs of confusion, he said. There is ample evidence that Mrs. Gibbons had become increasingly paranoid, reclusive, and emotionally unstable in the months leading up to her disappearance. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I watched the faces of the jury, and I saw what Jenna didn't They weren't buying it. Because when a woman survives an attempted murder, doesn't cry in front of cameras, doesn't scream in court and just tells the truth plainly, people believe her. The prosecution played the recordings. All of them. Jenna's voice, cold and crisp, floated through the courtroom like ice water. She's a burden. Do what you have to. After the trip, it's all clean. I didn't look at her as it played. I looked forward. When it ended, there was nothing left for her defense to do but pivot. They blamed Matthew. Mr. Gibbons was a central figure in the trust's affairs, the lawyer said. Much of the documentation was executed with his cooperation. Mrs. Gibbons simply followed his lead. Cowards always do that turn on the next in line when the fire reaches their feet. But even then, Jenna didn't speak up. She never defended Matthew. And maybe that was the truest moment of all. The prosecution laid everything out. The false death certificate, the altered trust documents, the accelerated property transfers, the private investigator's report showing the real-time manipulation of assets, and of course the video. I hadn't planned to release it, but the judge allowed it into evidence. The one I recorded just days before the trip, sitting at my desk. Plain background. My voice steady. If you're seeing this, something has happened to me. It was not an accident. My daughter-in-law, Jenna Gibbons, has been quietly and deliberately removing me from my own legacy. I have reason to believe she intends to expedite that process. If I vanish, this is your proof. It played for 73 seconds. When it ended, the courtroom was silent. Not even a cough. Jenna stared down at the table, her hand clenched tight around a pen she never used. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. The verdict came faster than we expected. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder. Fraud. Conspiracy. 12 years. No parole until 9. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there as the judge read her sentence, feeling the chill of the courtroom settle into my bones like seawater had months earlier. When they led her away in cuffs, she didn't look back. Not once. I stayed seated long after everyone else had filed out. A few reporters tried to approach. I ignored them. A bailiff offered me water. I shook my head. And then I was alone, sitting in a courtroom where I had just watched the woman who tried to erase me be sent away in chains. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Not in the way Jenna used to call me. Not that dismissive, patronizing version of tired. This was soul deep. A weariness from surviving something no mother should ever have to. Because here's the truth. Court doesn't give you your heart back. Justice doesn't restore what love once built. It just ends the story. At least the legal one. When I walked out into the parking lot, the sky was gray. Soft wind, smell of rain on concrete. And for the first time in months, no one followed me. No cameras, no questions, no Jenna. I drove myself home, windows down. No music, just the sound of tires on road. And when I got there, my home, the one I had almost lost, I stood in the front yard and looked at it like it was new again. The shutters, the white brick. The porch I'd once painted by hand with Matthew when he was 11. It was still standing. So was I. The next morning I visited the graveyard. Not for Jenna, not for Matthew, for my husband. His stone sat under an old maple tree, quiet, clean. I brought him the verdict. Not in words exactly, just in presence. I stood there for a long time, thinking of the life we'd planned, the family we built, the legacy we guarded, and how it had almost all slipped away from the inside. I didn't know what came next. Not fully, but I knew what wouldn't. There would be no second chances, no quiet reconciliation, no staged apology tour. What Jenna took from me could never be returned, and what Matthew gave away, that was his choice, his burden, and I no longer planned to carry it. She almost got it all. That's what stays with me sometimes, how close she came. If I hadn't prepared, hadn't noticed, hadn't waited, Jenna would have walked away with more than just my name and my trust fund. She would have rewritten everything, and the world would have believed her. Because that's what power does. It doesn't scream. It whispers, smiles, hosts charity luncheons in your memory while quietly changing the deeds on your properties, but now all of it was gone. From her. The trust fund locked, the properties frozen, the Gibbons Foundation renamed, restructured, and placed under an independent board with oversight from legal observers. Every signature Jenna had ever falsified was reversed under court order. It took weeks of paperwork, meetings, hearings, but I was there for every single one. Present, focused, calm. Because when someone tries to steal your life, you don't let anyone else finish the cleanup. You do it yourself. The trust's total value, $4.2 billion assets spanning 5 provinces, 4 countries, and over 300 employees across development, healthcare, and housing sectors. She wanted all of it. What she ended up with, a state-issued jumpsuit, an orange ID badge, and a frozen smile she no longer used in public. What people forget is that theft of wealth isn't just about the money. It's about access. And Jenna had woven herself into the fabric of that access. Magazine features, speaking panels, private donor circles. For years, she wore my legacy like a tailored coat. Told herself she belonged in rooms I'd built brick by brick. Now she was erased from them. Every article that mentioned her as co-founder retracted. Every profile that praised her leadership archived and removed. The board issued a formal statement. Helen Gibbons is the sole founder and visionary of the organization. Any previously attributed roles have been corrected to reflect this truth. They didn't apologize for believing her. I didn't expect them to. People like Jenna survive because they speak with confidence. And because the world rarely pauses to question a pretty lie if it's wrapped in good PR and pressed slacks, but eventually the lie unravels, and when it does, there's no tape strong enough to hold it together. Her lawyers tried to negotiate a financial settlement behind the scenes, offered to preserve certain assets if I agreed to drop the civil charges. I declined. Every cent comes back, I told my attorney. Everyone. I didn't want revenge money. I wanted rectification. I wanted to undo every move she made with a signature that wasn't hers to use. And we did. Bit by bit. She owned nothing now. The house she'd moved into with Matthew sold at auction. The car she drove with my initials on the title, repossessed. The foundation credit cards canceled, closed, traced. And then came the audit. Quiet. Detailed. Brutal. It uncovered nearly $6 million in consulting fees she'd funneled to offshore accounts. Fake vendors. Shell companies. One of them was in Matthew's name. He never responded to the findings, never disputed them. He simply vanished from the world that raised him. I don't know where he is now. Some say he moved to Vancouver. Others say overseas. I haven't asked. I won't. Because the moment I saw his signature next to hers on that final document, The one where they declared me legally dead. I knew we were finished. Some lines can't be uncrossed. But here's the part that surprised even me. I didn't rebuild the empire for myself. After I reclaimed it all, I sat with my legal team, the board, and a few old allies ones who had stayed quiet but faithful through the storm, and we rewrote the mission. The Gibbons Trust would no longer be about legacy. It would be about impact. We created new grants for whistleblowers, emergency shelters for elderly women displaced by financial abuse, legal funds for victims of family betrayal. Because this story, it wasn't just mine. Too many women are silenced by people they love, gaslit into believing they're confused, old, in the way, told their value ends the moment they stop producing, providing, or agreeing. Not anymore. Not here. Not with my name attached to it. I renamed the core fund the Second Shore, because some of us survive the fall, some of us come back stronger, some of us tell our story before they get the ending they want. I've spoken at 7 conferences since the trial. I never talk about Jenna by name. I never bring up Matthew. I speak about deception, about quiet strength, about what it means to be erased and to write yourself back into the world. And every time I finish, someone in the audience comes up to me with tears in their eyes and says, "That could have been me." And I nod, because it almost was. I keep one item in my home office now, a frame. Inside it, the original trust title, my name alone. Ink faded at the edges, corners folded from years of use. I placed it on the wall above the fireplace where the last working security camera once sat, the one Jenna didn't know about. And every morning I look at it, not for pride, but for proof that no matter how far they pushed me, I didn't go under. It was strange how quiet everything became. Once the money was back, the lawsuits were settled and the headlines dried up. No more microphones shoved in my face. No more lawyers in crisp suits whispering strategy. No more eyes watching my every move, waiting for me to break or to gloat. Just silence. Real silence this time. Not the kind that rots in your bones like the silence they forced on me before the fall. This was different. It was the kind that follows survival. A quiet earned, not imposed. I spent my mornings walking the same path through my garden. Just me, a mug of black tea, and the steady crunch of gravel underfoot. The wisteria had bloomed again, purple and sweet. That year it wrapped itself around the arbor as if nothing had ever happened. But I had changed. There are things I no longer do. I don't answer unknown numbers. I don't keep anything important in drawers I didn't install myself. And I don't speak anyone's name unless they've earned the right to stay in my mouth. You learn that after betrayal, how sacred a name is, how dangerous silence can be when it's not your own. I started volunteering again, quietly, unannounced. No press releases, no fundraisers in my name. Just work, real work, folding clothes in shelters, reviewing grant applications late at night, holding the hands of women who said through tears, "He said I had imagined it too." I didn't offer them wisdom, I offered them proof that surviving doesn't mean becoming whole again, it means becoming real. And once you're real, they can't take anything else from you, because you've already let it go. That's what I learned the day I hit the water. I remember it now more clearly than I should. The weightless moment after the push. That split-second flight before the cold swallowed me. People think that kind of moment comes with screaming panic, some cinematic fight to survive. It doesn't. It's quiet. The world muffles. Time bends. You don't think of your name or your family or your bank account. You think of truth. And the truth that rang in my bones as I fell was this. I had already been dying for years. Not physically, not in the obvious sense. But the part of me that mattered the woman I used to be had been chipped away by whispers, by stolen glances, by the slow erasure of my presence in my own life. Jenna didn't kill me. She just made it official. And in doing so, she gave me back to myself. Because when I surfaced, spitting seawater lungs, burning arms, trembling, I didn't think save me. I thought no more. No more pretending. No more hoping Matthew would speak up. No more begging to stay included in a life I'd built with my own hands. That's why I didn't go straight to the police. Because what I needed wasn't protection. I needed proof. Proof for every woman who's ever been called a burden in her own home. Proof that silence isn't surrender. Proof that you don't have to forgive people just because you love them. Forgiveness, if it comes, must be clean, not convenient. And Matthew, he hasn't called. Not since the trial. Not since the letter with those 4 scribbled words. I never meant to. But that's not a confession. It's an escape hatch. And I don't open doors for people who burned the house down. Instead, I started writing, not a memoir, not a tell-all, a manual. For women like me, quiet women, strong women, women who had everything taken in the most civilized, calculated ways. I called it the Ledger of Absence. A guide for identifying what's missing before it's gone for good. It's not about revenge. It's about awareness. Because what happened to me, it didn't begin on that yacht. It began the first time I was interrupted mid-sentence and told, let's talk about this later. It began the moment I was asked to rest, to step back, to trust. The push didn't start at sea. It started in my own kitchen. I get letters now. From women across the country. They start with things like, I thought I was imagining it. They said I was too sensitive. My daughter-in-law calls me the old girl when she thinks I'm not listening. I read every word. Because these women aren't crazy. They're being erased. Quietly. Methodically. And if I hadn't spoken up, if I hadn't stayed alive, they might never have known they could too. Some days I still look at the water, the sea that tried to take me, the silence that used to suffocate me, and I feel nothing but respect, because the water didn't kill me, it baptized me, not into purity or forgiveness, but into truth. And truth is colder than salt water, sharper than betrayal, but once you taste it, you never swallow lies again. Jenna is still serving her sentence. I don't think about her most days. She doesn't haunt me. She tried to steal my life. But she forgot something. You can't kill a woman who's already let go. I didn't fall off that yacht. I left the table, and I swam to shore on my own terms. The morning after I finalized everything, transfers, settlements, protections, I sat at my desk, opened a fresh notebook, and wrote 1 sentence across the first page. This is not a will. This is a decision. The legal one was already done. Ironclad. Filed. No loopholes, no second chances. Matthew was no longer an heir. Jenna had been formally disinherited. Their names weren't blacked out, they were never mentioned to begin with. But this was something else. This was my true will. Not for lawyers or courts. For memory. For legacy. For my granddaughter. She's only 7 now, still too young to understand the weight of silence, the cost of complicity. But one day she'll grow curious about what happened, why she visits Grandma at a different house now, why her parents don't speak of me at all. And when that time comes, this notebook will be waiting, not filled with anger, not even pain, just truth. I wrote it slowly, over weeks. Pages filled in between garden walks and sleepless nights. I told her everything, not just what happened, but who I was before it. The girl who married young, the woman who raised a son on her own, the builder, the dreamer, the fighter. I told her about her father, the good parts too, how he used to write me notes in his lunchbox, how he cried when she was born. I didn't paint him as a villain, but I didn't lie either. I told her what silence can do, how it corrodes trust, how it turns love into fear, how it let a woman like Jenna stand on my neck while calling me family. I ended the letter with a promise: you come to me one day and you'll hear the full story. Not because I want you to choose sides, but because you deserve to know the ground you're standing on. Then I tucked it away in my safety deposit box with instructions to release it to her when she turns 18. The rest of the notebook, I filled it with the parts of me no one saw. Recipes I never passed down, maps of the old neighborhoods I invested in, letters to my younger self, warnings, laughs, honest mistakes. Because this new version of a will wasn't about wealth. It was about remembrance. And I wanted to be remembered honestly, not as perfect, but as present. Present in my decisions, present in my absence, present in every brick of the empire I rebuilt. The official documents now name a public education fund as the primary beneficiary of my estate. Scholarships for women over 50 who want to start again. Microloans for single mothers. Emergency grants for caregivers trying to escape financial abuse. And not one plaque has my name on it. Not one classroom. Not one library. Because I don't need to be remembered in stone. I just need to know I left something standing when others tried to knock it down. People sometimes ask me if I regret any of it, if I do things differently, and I tell them this no, not because it was easy, not because I won, but because I didn't disappear. They tried to erase me with paperwork, champagne, and a gentle shove, but I wrote myself back in, with silence, with stillness, with time. I still get letters from Jenna. Not often. Just twice in the last year. They go straight into the drawer, unopened. There's nothing left for her to say. As for Matthew, he never reached out again, and that's the part that used to ache the most. Not losing him, but knowing he never fought to stay. That ache has dulled now, not gone, but manageable. Some grief you don't get over. You just learn to walk around it. I pass it sometimes in the hallways of my mind, nodding to it like an old scar. We don't speak anymore, but we know each other well. I leave flowers at my husband's grave every year on our anniversary. Last time I whispered, "We're okay now," not because things went back to how they were, but because I survived what came after, and that's enough. The last page of the notebook is blank. I've thought about how to end it. Maybe I'll let her finish it someday. Write her own version of what happens next. Because I don't believe in fairy tale endings anymore. Just truth. And the truth is, I lived. Even when they said I wouldn't. Even when they pushed. Even when they stopped saying my name. I lived. And I left more than a fortune behind. I left proof.